So welcome to our meditation time. I would invite you to get comfortable. Whatever spot that you've chosen for yourself, just let it be as it is, and you just settle into it. And just really honor the fact that you've shown up for yourself into this present moment. Shown up with this intention of letting go of the busyness, letting go of the noise, and seeing if you can just cultivate just a bit more stillness within. And so as we all collectively do that together, let's just take a few breaths together to really seal this time that we've committed. So take a slow, deep breath in, and a slow, gentle breath out. And breathing in and breathing out. Just one more together. A slow breath in and a gentle breath out. And as you're settling, just begin to be aware of how do you feel? How do you physically feel? How do you mentally feel? How do you emotionally feel? And energetically. And just see if, as you notice these things about yourself, if you are willing to just embrace it all. All the ways that you are in this moment. Embrace them all. And then I would invite us all to just turn our attention to those thoughts. For some of you, maybe the mind has already begun to slow down and grow quiet. Others, the mind is trying to pull you away and send you different places, thinking about a list or things to do or something that's heavy on your heart. And for others, you're kind of somewhere in between. You catch this glimpse of the quiet and the stillness of the mind, and then it moves again. And so our practice today, as it's grounded in the teachings of the Yoga Sutras, is about this concept that we were taught thousands of years ago called Nirodha Parinama. Nirodha Parinama. And if you translate that into English, what it means is Nirodha is restraint and Parinama is transformation. And so what this teaching is telling us is that if we want to truly find transformation in our lives, which I think that we all do, one of the best tools that we have is the tool of restraint. Not restraint in this idea of always not allowing yourself to do something or all the thou shalt nots of the world. But it's a conscious and deliberate restraint. It's understanding the why and then knowing what to do instead of what you are going to do. And so I want to just take you on a journey as we sit here together for just these few minutes and think about what it's like to teach a little person how to behave. Maybe for some of you, you've been a parent or a grandparent. Maybe you have nieces or nephews, or you've been a teacher, or you've even witnessed examples of a child being taught something in a restaurant or in the grocery store. And oftentimes, maybe in your own life, or maybe what you've noticed is that when a little person, maybe 3 years old, exhibits a behavior that's not quite meeting the expectations that the adult has, there's often this inclination just to try to stop the behavior. And so when we talk about this idea of restraint in the Yoga Sutras, that's not what restraint means in these terms, not just the stopping, but rather think about maybe yourself as a parent, a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, or maybe what you've seen as a really good example of a mom or a dad teaching their little one. What we want to do is when a behavior arises that we don't think is appropriate or we don't want to see it repeated, we first get this little person to just pause. Not stopping the behavior, but pausing in the middle of all the stimulus and all the reaction of whatever it is. And then we very gently explain to them what they did and help them to see why we maybe shouldn't do that the next time. But then there's another step. Because in their little 3-year-old mind, it's not just enough to explain the why. They can't quite understand that. But the last step is we teach them something different. We give them a replacement behavior to whatever it was that they did that wasn't appropriate or wasn't acceptable or didn't meet the expectation. We don't just tell them the why. We give them something different. Because chances are that situation will come up again, and their little bodies, their little emotions will want to respond, and we need them to know what to do instead. Well, Patanjali, the author of these Yoga Sutras, would say that we need the same thing. We have these thumbprints on our mind. We have these conditioned ways that we just do certain things. And if we really want to experience transformation in our lives, the kind that brings abiding peace and gentleness of spirit and compassionate eyes everywhere you look, then we've got to know something different that we could do. We don't just restrain ourselves. We don't just stop the behavior, but we do something different. And we learn that something different in the pause. And so what I'd like us to do is just really practice that. Notice the thoughts that come in. Think about what caused them. What was the stimulus? What was the thing that prompted or triggered that thought? And then as you pause, instead of getting frustrated that the mind is so busy and so noisy, or that that's something that you've tried to stop thinking about it, and why does it keep coming back up? Instead of feeling that way, what if we could pause and actually teach ourselves something different? Sometimes we use a mantra. Sometimes we use an affirmation. Sometimes we actually physically have a practice that we do. But just like those little kids, we've got to give ourselves the grace, the understanding to know that we need something different, or we will keep doing the same thing again and again. And we're so drawn toward this idea of transformation that I think we might be willing to do something a little different next time. And so what does that look like? How do we practice that? So let's just sit for just these next few breaths and just see. Maybe your mind is still and quiet. Maybe something comes up, but just notice. Notice if there's activity going on in your head and in your thoughts. And so here's my example. In just those few breaths as we sat, even as I am attempting to be still and quiet, I heard the sound of one of the dogs out in the hallway, chewing on something, making some noise. And the conditioned way of being is that I would get frustrated of, why can't they just be quiet? Don't these dogs know that I'm trying to meditate? And I know that that sounds silly, but we do have these emotional responses to things. And so what do? What could my replacement be here in the pause as I'm trying to figure out? I don't want to be frustrated by the sound of the dogs doing what they do. And so for me, what I've begun to do a lot lately is I use the affirmation or the mantra of, and so it is. So here I sit in the quiet, trying to keep my mind steady and still. I'm distracted by the sound of the dog. I pause and take a breath and tell myself, and so it is. And that's a pretty neutral, a pretty benign or easy example. But the idea, no matter what it is that's coming up in your head, we have to practice doing something different. I want to transform. I want to have long periods of quiet and stillness within me, even as the dogs are moving around the house, making the noises that dogs make. I don't want to be drawn out there and react to it. I want to breathe, understand that, and so it is, and go back to being still and quiet. Let's try another one. You're driving down the road. You are thoughtful. You are mindful. The car is quiet, and you truly have this one-pointed focus of just watching what you're doing and not allowing yourself to be distracted. And you drive, and everything feels even and steady. Your thoughts are clear. Your breath is steady. You're safe and you're grounded. And then all of a sudden, this car comes up behind you going too fast and gets right on your bumper, as if he's urging you just to go faster or to get out of the way. And in your mindful, steady way of driving, you notice in your mirror that he's there. And you have two choices. Go back to those old conditioned ways that maybe you've had where you get frustrated and so you slow down or you do something to make a point. Or you've decided that you want to use restraint because you're trying to find transformation, and so instead of slipping into these conditioned ways of being, you do something different. You look at what your speed is, you continue to maintain it, and you go back to mindfully driving. Your heart rate stays steady. Your grip on the steering wheel is still light and with ease. And you've taught yourself that even though there's someone impatient behind you, it doesn't get in the way of your ability to be still and centered on the inside. And I could go on and on with lots of examples, but the idea is we all have those thoughts that are like this little prick of our spirit. And we have these conditioned ways of responding to them. And the first thing we have to do is notice those conditioned ways that maybe we've done for years. And in an effort to restrain those, we pause and we teach ourselves something different. And we practice that. And that driver could still be behind you, following way too close, and that dog could still be in the hall, making too much noise. But we don't let it change us. That is Nirodha Parinama, restraint that leads to transformation. And I know that we have examples all throughout our world, on social media, in the news, in the government, in entertainment. We have all these examples of folks around us that are not using restraint. And we could let that frustrate us as well. But what if we could really make this practice about us? Focused on the transformation that we so desire, that we know is possible, and using the restraint of our own thoughts, our own conditioned ways of being to teach ourselves something different. So let's just pause here. I'm going to say the Sanskrit term for it just a few times, just to kind of usher us into just a couple minutes of quiet. And then you notice what comes up in your mind, if anything, and I'll notice what comes up in mine. I'll make note of it. You'll make note of it. And then in the moments to follow or the days to follow, maybe you'll be willing to teach yourself something different. Just like that parent teaching that little one a different way of responding, a different way of behaving. Until over time, it starts to stick. And all of a sudden, those conditioned ways of being are no longer conditioned ways of being. So just continue to breathe, cultivating this idea of Nirodha Parinama. Nirodha Parinama. Nirodha Parinama. Restraint that leads to transformation. Nirodha Parinama. Nirodha Parinama. A parent would never allow a kid that they love and care about to keep making the same mistakes again and again. They would teach them something different, guiding them, nurturing them, discipling them along the way, so that they make different choices, better choices. And I would hope that we each love and care about ourselves enough to do the same. Teaching ourselves something different, sitting in the pause and thinking, what could I do here instead of what I usually do? How could I think here instead of the way that I usually think? What am I willing to change to really begin to experience transformation? And then, am I willing to practice it again and again and again? I tell you this, and so it is, this mantra of me just taking things as they come, it's getting easier and easier. Still not perfect. It's still not 100% of the time. But I've been practicing it for a while now, and it really is allowing me to just be. And when you can discover that within yourselves, your nervous system will thank you. Your mind will be so appreciative. And the light in your spirit and in your soul will be so bright that you can't imagine doing anything differently from that next time. Let's cultivate that in the days to come. Nirodha Parinama. Using the idea of restraint to teach ourselves something different on this road to transformation. Namaste.